How's everyone doing? Good, good. Everyone looks bright and fresh. I am unfortunately not the same. I work for a wonderful motley crew that ekes about 18 hours a day out of me, but I signed up for it and I must say that I am enjoying it. So good morning to you, the wonderful people of St. Croix and our business community. I want to thank Mark and the board of the St. Croix Chamber of Commerce for inviting me this morning. I have a lot to present, a lot to speak of. We're going to be sort of using the room on the end there, which is going to kind of turn into a walkabout. As you know, we assumed office on January 5th, Lieutenant Governor Potter and myself, and we have been working to get a full handle on the issues affecting the government. And we have come to the full realization with our financial team that there really isn't room to cut another $100 million out of the expenditures of the government and provide essential services. We're not going to do any campaign themes here, but I think everyone in the territory is fully aware that many of our essential service components, law enforcement, teachers, nurses, we are at critical stages of lack of staffing. And so in our world, in the world of public administration, the only way forward is to grow the economy, grow revenues, create job opportunities, and really create a very strong environment for outside investment in this territory. Whether that investment be in tourism, financial service sector, e-commerce, robotic manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, arts, copyrights, clearly hotel development, in every area that we can drive dollars into the community for construction, for building, for investing in our infrastructure, federal dollars, the only way out is to grow the economy, the private sector, create jobs, and create a sustainable, growing, better infrastructure for this territory. And given that realization, thank you. Given that realization, then all of our efforts, most of our efforts and our resources must go in that direction. The Inspector General's report that was released recently on the Economic Development Authority is horrific. I don't think many of us would argue about the need for improvements in that area. And I am not here this morning to point fingers or to talk about blame or whose fault it is. It's for all intents and purposes, to me, it's really not relevant. There are two key things that we believe is very important. One, that we reaffirm that the Mapp Potter administration and Ken Mapp personally are strong supporters, believe and understand the benefit of the Economic Development Commission program to growing the economy in the Virgin Islands, and we will continue to support it and to push it. This next most essential issue then is how do we reorganize, restructure, and reformat EDA and EDC to work in a functional way that in exchange for tax incentives and benefits, in exchange for revenues and giving up obligations for taxes to the people of the territory, that we get a true exchange of value return, creation of jobs, contributions of monies for a nonprofit community, the building in the territory, areas where we give up tax revenues and tax obligation in exchange for economic development and infusion. And this brought me, while I attended the National Governors Association meeting in Washington 2 weeks ago, and again, my wonderful staff just filled the agenda. It took me to the Department of Treasury, which was very important, to meet with the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury to talk about the EDA program. And the Mapp Potter administration takes no credit for this, but we are pleased to announce that the Treasury has agreed and will be publishing new regulations to reduce the residency requirement for EDC commission beneficiaries from 183 to about 153. And they're going to And this is really very important as folks who are true EDC beneficiaries that have to travel and do the conduct of their business. Now, they're going to do that in a way of not simply knocking off 183 and inserting 153, but in creating a system where once an individual truly establishes their bona fide residency in the territory, they will have access to be out of the territory more and not have to have a physical presence. In addition, they're going to be writing regulations that will have a litmus test, and they'll have about 8 or 9 criteria on this list that if one meets these criteria, in their mind, it establishes true bona fide residency status, and so the number of physical days in the territory will not be counted. And this is a major step forward in the challenges that we've had by the Treasury Department, and many of you are fully aware that we've had tremendous flight from our EDC commission program. Our next phase, which this administration will be responsible for and will drive our interests forward, is to deal with clarity and definition on source income. Source income in terms of business and what provisions of income really are truly subject to the commission benefits that we give, so that the businessman or woman is clearly understanding what the rules are, what source of business income is subject to waiver of tax obligations. And this is going to require not an administrative rule of the Department of Treasury, but it's going to require some changes to the Jobs Act, which dealt with this issue. I met with Senator Mitch McConnell. We met with Senator Bill Schuster, Congressman Bill Schuster, and that's on the infrastructure side, and we'll talk about that later. Senator Tim Scott and Senator Joe Manchin on Virginia, and the staff of the Senate Finance Committee, which is led by Senator Orrin Hatch. And many of you may be aware that Senator Hatch is a friend of the Virgin Islands. Well, I must say Senator McConnell as well, because he has been coming here for 23 straight years and have honeymooned on St. John. The point of this conversation on the clarification of income has to go to that there are going to be about 2 or 3 opportunities in the next 9 to 12 months in the Senate for some limited issue of tax clarification and legislation. And the Treasury has agreed, and I have to be careful how I say this, the Treasury doesn't support legislation that it does not promote itself. What it does is it agrees not to oppose. And so the Treasury has agreed not to oppose our mutual understanding of legislation that will clarify source income and clarify it as well as it deals with the captive insurance industry. Because there's no real requirement for us to have any amendments to Virgin Islands law that will drive captive business in the Virgin Islands. What will drive the captive industry in the Virgin Islands is the income issue and source income issues and the placement of funds on federal legislation. And so we're going to move to have some amendments to the Jobs Act that will allow us to do that. That can shift the domicile and the residency of captives that are born out of U.S. companies. So we will continue to work very closely with the Treasury Department to ensure that we have a mutual understanding on the legislation, and we do not have any opposition to the legislation, and we have a commitment by the staff of the Committee on Finance to include our changes in the early rounds of changes in the tax code that can really help us rebound our EDC industry and EDC companies in the territory and stabilize the issues that affect us. Now, I know some of you may have some concerns and some questions, and I'll ask for some water if I can get some. Thank you. Some of you may have some concerns and questions on the issue of Puerto Rico and their EDC program. And I met with Governor Padilla on more than one occasion in the National Governors Association meetings, and we agreed to have mutual meetings in the territory and Puerto Rico to deal with some of our relationship issues. I must say that we were very warm and cordial and very friendly, and we see a major path going forward. But I know that some of you have this concern that the EDC program in Puerto Rico could bleed the Virgin Islands EDC program. We don't necessarily agree with that. And just in short summary, the Puerto Rico program is basically founded on a zero-sum revenue base, which basically says, yes, we give up 90% of our tax obligation, federal tax obligation. You pay some tax revenue to the territory, and that's what we have. And both of us have that on a legal platform. However, what Puerto Rico has been doing is giving a subsidy equal to the payment of the taxes that you make, which gives you a zero revenue obligation. And their strategy is, things are so bad in Puerto Rico, let's just go after jobs and we'll worry about the government financial condition later. Let's just put people to work. If the government even had to go, and I'm not saying the governor told me this, but if the government had to go bankrupt, would the bankruptcy court seize police cars, fire trucks, education supplies, health stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's not really worry about that in the short term. Let's worry about jobs, and then we'll worry about government finances later. That's a horrible position to be in, and as governor of the Virgin Islands, I'm very happy to tell you that is not a strategy we would consider, and it is not a strategy that is necessary for the Virgin Islands. And for those also that have a concern that the rated bonds of Puerto Rico somehow have an affect to the rating of the bonds in the Virgin Islands, let me further suggest to you that they are not connected. Our structure for financing is tremendously different and stable in terms of the way we do our debt financing as opposed to Puerto Rico. And this is not the forum to explain the distinctions, but from my PFA days, just please accept that I could clearly articulate what those distinctions are and why both of those issues are not tied together. On to Congressman Bill Schuster and the infrastructure component of building the economy. As many of you may be aware, the highway transportation funds to the territory are roughly about $16 million a year. Congressman Bill Schuster, Republican and the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on the House side, which is responsible for the allocation of some $350 billion of surface transportation money annually in the nation, has agreed, one, to restore to the Virgin Islands all of its cut transportation revenues over the last 5-6 years. This could be about another $25–30 million to the territory. And we will work to get back to the level as a minimum action of $20 million, but our ultimate destination is to get an allocation annually that is not less than 50% of the least populous state. The least populous state in the nation is Wyoming. 50%, not less than 50% of that allocation would mean $113 million to the Virgin Islands. And we do that on the premise that, and we had these conversations with the Department of Transportation, they're working with us to achieve this objective, because as everyone or many of you may be aware, in the Virgin Islands, to pave a road pursuant or build a road pursuant to DOT standards, which is the requirement by which you would receive federal highway dollars, in the Virgin Islands, a 2-lane road for construction costs $1 million per mile. At $16 million a year, there's not a lot of road construction that can take place. And while some of our allocations are based on population, the Virgin Islands population is approximately 107,000 people. We house on our infrastructure approximately 2 million visitors every year. And the movement and transportation and the handling of these many citizens, most of whom are American citizens, are very difficult for our local treasury and our local taxpayers to support an infrastructure system that can make that functional. And so I am heartened by the response and the reaction to move in this direction to provide the territory with significantly more highway transportation monies. And as we talk about some projects going forward in this conversation, I think I will be able to make the point why $16 million is simply an inadequate sum of money. And there just isn't any way that we're going to get much roads built or repaired in the territory at that level. As an example, many of you have seen the improvements on the Melvin Evans Highway from East Airport Road to the intersection at Golden Grove in terms of drainage, resurfacing, striping, and repairs of lights. That project was over $5 million. So that is the limited amount of work that one could conduct in the territory in terms of the limited amount of highway transportation money that we received. Many of you may have questions on the Hovensa matter. We continue to speak with Hovensa, and the short reality on this matter is we continue to extend our cooperation on Hovensa's issue with a sale. Some of you may be aware that folks are continuing to fly into the territory and look at the facility. Mr. Godell, the Senior Vice President, Timothy Godell at Hess Oil, had advised me that they believe they have a buyer and that there may be some closing of a sale, but obviously could not warrant that. And for all intents and purposes, while I would like Hovensa to sell the property and pay the government what it is owed, I am not stuck in that situation. While I will not be able to speak this morning in great detail, I will like to alert the people of the Virgin Islands that in my meetings with President Obama and the governors, and we sent this information up prior to our arrival to make sure that this conversation could take place. We believe that the Hovensa property, particularly its docking and storage facilities, which sit on land that are leased by the government of the Virgin Islands to Hess Oil, have significant Department of Defense value. And we made a presentation to the Obama administration on how this value can be used in the territory. The president did acknowledge our invitation and asked me to stand by after our meeting with the governor's office. They wanted to have a conversation with me. I was brought back to the White House the following day at noon to meet with two of the president's senior advisors and involved and participated in a conference call with members of the Department of Defense. And I will say to you that I can't make any assurances to the people of the Virgin Islands what the tenor and the depth of those conversations were, but I can say to you that in about 15 days there will be a full assessment team from the Department of Defense on St. Croix doing a complete assessment of the Hovensa property. My objective is economic activity, jobs, and security. And to the extent that HOVIC and Hovensa does what it needs to do in the transference and sale of its property, that's fine. We will accept whatever monies are owed to us. We are in a foreclosure arrangement, but this administration is focused on what value activity can take place at that site, jobs that can be created, use of the docking facilities, a networking of our assets of the VI National Guard, and some participation in the nation's policy for homeland security issues and defense. As you know, the president has moved to liberalize relationships with Cuba. I will use Senator Mitch McConnell's language. That is an irreversible trajectory, meaning it will happen. Cuba has already indicated its desire to have its asset at Guantanamo Bay returned to them. And if that facility is closed and the training and all the issues that take place at Guantanamo Bay occurs, for all intents and purposes, the Department of Defense and the U.S. military will have little or no presence in this region. We believe that St. Croix is positioned very well to provide that location and that the assets, the value, the jobs, and the security that could be brought to this territory could be significant. On the issue of Pauley Joseph Stadium, I want to be very clear that we are not opposed to this project. And point of fact, I don't think many folks in this room, knowing my work at the Public Finance Authority, at the Frederick State Economic Revitalization Project, I could be opposed to this project. I want to be sort of clear that my concern in this job is to ensure that you, the people of the territory, receive the value for your money. I am not going to participate in just signing contracts and spending money on some premise that there will be some economic return to this territory. That is not how you can manage. That does not work. And anyone running a successful business will tell you that is a path to bankruptcy. And so that I suspended the project simply because how do you sign a contract of $20 million to do a project for which there are no concepts, there are no designs, there are no specifications, and then the contract have loose ends regarding what could be done with savings, what the costs are, or no lack of cost containment. And in the room next door, and I will travel with you when we're ready to take that walk, you may not be aware, but in 2005, the government of the Virgin Islands spent approximately $200,000 for a design of the facilities and the town of Frederiksted at the Paulie Joseph Stadium, including, which is not contained in this current contract as we have read it, the mitigation for the flood issues that occur at LaGrange. So if you put $20 million on the footprint of Paulie Joseph Stadium and do not deal with the flood issues that come out of the LaGrange Hill, on our first major rain, you will lose the facility because your dugouts and bathrooms will be filled with mud. And so when you go in the room next door, you will be able to see a complete layout that was driven by the community of St. Croix in 2005 in a community charrette process. And all that you see there, we will not be able to all do at $20 million. We may need to put more money there, but there are funds available under the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for the flood mitigation issues at LaGrange, which needs to be tied into part of this process. And I will tell you what the Army Corps of Engineers said to me. A lot of what you want to do with your flood mitigation issues with the Frederiksted process, or phase 2 of the Frederiksted revitalization project, is aesthetic. We will only contribute money to mitigate flood damage, and that's fine. We will take the money to mitigate the flood damage and add the additional pieces of monies to make sure that that project works in tandem with the revitalization of Frederiksted. And I should submit to the community that the whole issue of the stadium and the softball field and the festival village and everything that was occurring in that area was not about building a stadium only. It is about revitalizing a town, driving the value for visitation, for sports, for competition, and for training of our young people. It is about driving investment in the town of Frederiksted. And the evidence supports that when we did phase 1 on Strand Street and put the government money in the infrastructure, any of you that are in Frederiksted, we ask you to just simply turn east. Stand in the park and turn east. And every private property that abuts the improvement of downtown Frederiksted on the waterfront has been restored and renovated by 100% private capital with no tax incentives and no government money. And that just drives the point that if the government takes care of its responsibilities in the infrastructure, private capital and investment will follow. And so what we want you to see in the room next door is your plan, your work, your signatures for committee chairpersons in the charrette process that fully designed a stadium to house a population of 5,000 people, a softball field, flood mitigation issues, including the electrical infrastructures, the need to raise the level of the field from being below sea level to above sea level to be able to protect the asset that is there. Your government paid to have this done. Why do we need to put $2 million more on the table to start the process all over again? So what is our plan? We're going to bring the company in that worked in 2005 that developed this process with the community, only to fully design the product in tandem with the community's efforts and the dollars that the government have available, do a costing of that project, for which we then will sit with the current contractor, GEC, to see if we can work out a system where they can in fact have access to do the construction of the project, but that the government knows what it is buying and what it should pay for and what the quality attributes of the stadium ought to be and what the flood and mitigation issues to protect the town and the community of LaGrange in tandem with federal dollars that we need to ensure that happen. And so this is vital as part of the development of the Frederiksted area. I met with Carl Holtz, for whom I will see, I believe, next week, the 2 Tuesdays from now, in my breakfast to host the CEOs of the cruise line. Carl Holtz is the CEO of Disney Cruise Lines. And in speaking with him and meeting with him at his request on issues having to do with berthing in the St. Thomas and the Charlotte Amalie Harbor, and I don't think this would be a surprise to most folks, excuse me, where I sit in Government House at my desk, and I look up at the window, there's something that sits on the horizon. And I find myself in many meetings asking persons who are facing me, whose back is to the window, to look out the window and tell me what they see. And many times they tell me about the wonderful harbor, and they point to the cruise ships and the sailboats and the yachts. And I tell them, just look a little further. And when they look a little further, you know what they say to me? Ah, that's St. Croix. I said, yes. And they're sitting there waving at me. And so any conversation that we have on the economy and investments and growth in the territory, that island must be included. And so in my conversations with Mr. Carl Holtz, thank you. In my conversation with Mr. Carl Holtz, I asked about St. Croix. And he talked about the issues of the duplication of visits, and we tried St. Croix, and there's some issues in terms of it getting ready and being a full-fledged cruise ship destination. And I said, you know, but I need help. I'm willing to help you. The cruise industry and cruise traffic to the Virgin Islands is essential to our economy, and I'm going to support that, but I need help for where I come from. And Mr. Holtz extended to the people of the Virgin Islands and to you the full portfolio of Disney's technical support system. We're going to be getting together with you, Mark, and the Chamber of Commerce and the business community and residents on how what are the things we need to do to create a destination experience on St. Croix for cruise visitations. And there is no brand that I know of that exists on the planet today better than the Disney brand that have been able to successfully achieve experiences for its guests. He is going to do this gratis, no cost to this government in furtherance of their issues and their concerns and the needs that they have in St. Thomas to assist this government and this community to get St. Croix positioned to be a destination with its own identity, with its own experiences, because at the end of the day, we don't care if a passenger visits St. Croix and St. Thomas and it's the U.S. Virgin Islands. What we care is that they have very good experiences, and if they're on St. Croix and their experiences are uniquely different than that of St. Thomas, but they leave that they have not been able to complete their visit and do all that's available for them to do, and they need to fly back and spend time and stay on island, that's the objective that we want to achieve. And so we have to, my view, and you're not required at all to agree with me, but my view, we've been kind of plodding along and moving along and trying to get this done. I think Disney has been very effective at doing this in their business model. Everything that they may suggest, we may not accept and agree, but I believe that they have tremendous resources and they can provide tremendous technical support if we work as a team, the community, the government, and the residences and the businesses. If we work as a team, we would be able to do much for this destination on the island of St. Croix, and again, begin the process of growing our economy further and growing St. Croix's destination. And in our meeting, in our meeting with Commissioner Nicholson Doty, and I must commend her, and I will talk about some other issues I've done with her. She truly is an effective manager and advocate for tourism and guest destination building and experiences for this territory, and she has our full support. But we're going to work in tandem. When Commissioner Doty needs to speak to me, she dials a number and I answer the phone. She doesn't have to go through 3 and 4 people to reach me because her work is important and all of the commissioners' work is important, but I want to ensure that our single most important economy in this territory is given the support and the direction and the resources that it needs so that we can grow. We had a competitive advantage, we're losing it, and if we don't turn the corner, we will lose it. And it will not happen on my watch. So we're going to make sure that the things that need to be done are in fact done. part of the, and my conversation today is going to permit for questions. And so, Mark, if I'm going over my time, just wave and I'll wrap it up. But as part of this growing of the economy and growing and investing in the infrastructure, one of the things that we're going to show you today is two elements for the infrastructure issues in St. Thomas, Charlotte, Amalie, and the revitalization of downtown Charlotte, Amalie. And as many of you may know, the revitalization of downtown Charlotte, Amalie, and Main Street in particular has been driven by nonprofit entities, property owners, and businesses. And the Main Street revitalization is a $10 million project that is fully funded. The money is actually there. There are some litigations that I'm going to have to get personally involved to see if after this, the current tourist season, if we can move away from that litigation and get that project to move forward, because that money is there and a great deal of that money is federal funds and we do not want to lose it. And I don't know if Kimberly is ready that we could show the current Main Street project, not the waterfront, on the screen behind you. Can you get to the Main Street project, please? Right. This is a view of Main Street in what would be its finished form. And I had nothing to do with this, so this isn't me, but many of you may see elements that you see in Frederickstead on Main Street, and this project is completely funded, and we want to get it done by the next particular season. I think there's a different view. That's a view looking west, so if you're sort of by the post office, you see that, and if you are standing at the corner of Cardo's Jewelers, looking west down towards Market Street, this is what Main Street will be looking like when this project is completed. I think you have a view from the east as well. Right, this is a view looking east, and that's looking back up Main Street. This project is 100% fully funded, and I don't think we have any current photos of Main Street, but trust me, the comparison, there is no comparison with what exists now and what would exist. And part of what we are committed to doing in the revitalization of our towns in St. Croix and in St. Thomas is to drive a process of getting people to live in the towns. The towns cannot be revitalized if we do not have folks living in the town. The secondary issue, as you know, is transportation in St. Thomas is moving people. And we have a complete backlog of traffic congestion as more visitors come to the island, as issues pick up in the island. And there's been a project that the community in St. Thomas worked on, done by a charrette, and this project is estimated at $140 million. We're announcing that the administration is supporting this project. It is a community-driven project, and we're going to work to get the funding for this project. The federal government will pay up to 90% of the cost of this project, and we want you to see what this project is, because we are announcing today that we're in support of this project. It will be done in 2 phases. And so this is pretty much what the current Charlotte Amalie waterfront looks like. And Kim, you could show let's just start showing what the pieces is. And there'll be closer view photos that you would see. Currently, the waterfront will be expanded, 4-lane traffic. There'll be a walking esplanade on the seaside, and the highway would go around the legislature as opposed between the 4th and through the legislature. This component piece and this project requires also not only ground transportation, but water transportation. And the Lieutenant Governor and I have been speaking about this project with the taxi industry and letting them know here's an opportunity to get involved in driving water transportation in St. Thomas. There are currently 5 berths on St. Thomas for the cruise lines, and they're trying to get 2 cruise lines are trying to get 2 additional guaranteed berths. As you know, the West Indian Company announced a project on Long Bay to put a $70 million project in the Charlotte Amalie Harbor. And as I advised Norwegian Cruise Lines and the Disney Cruise Lines, we do not support that project in its location. We will not put 10 acres of concrete in the Charlotte Amalie Harbor and simply drive more congestion. As you could see, Kim, I don't know if there are more slides there, but as you can see from this project, the very community who did this project and put this together, and it's been approved for federal funding, there is no 10 acres of concrete in the harbor. And so the West Indian Company sort of threw it on the table in the last year and have not done the work they needed to do in terms of its impact. And the last thing we need to do is to destroy the product that exists there in our attempt to improve the quality of the project. So we will not be doing that. So these issues will be available for you to look at when we finish our conversation here, and you can take the time to look at it, and I'll certainly be around for a little bit to have more discussions. I just want to return just briefly before I open the floor for questions. At the NGA, I am now a member of its Economic Development and Commerce Committee, so I'll be working with a pod of governors that are dealing on the issues having to do with economic development and job creation, and that is a very high priority for me and the administration. And we're going to have some conversations with the University of the Virgin Islands because, again, manufacturing is returning to the nation in big droves, in good-paying jobs, and in robotics and manufacturing, dealing in robotics and technology. And there's an absence of qualified, trained resources for these jobs. And let me say that these jobs do not require college degrees. Now, a person, certainly, and we encourage our young people to go to college. That's important. Furthering one's education is vital. But I think a number of you may concede in this room today that you can have a master's degree, that there's no assurance you're going to get a job. And we got a lot of folks with bachelor's and master's and PhDs, and they have no skill. And the new economy and the new requirement for growth and development of economic expansion is going to require people with skills, their ability to perform, to create and deliver value, and to be able to get jobs done, get them done timely and efficiently. And what we, in the next number of years, want to do in concert with Dr. Hall and the board at the University of the Virgin Islands is to set the university on a trajectory where we are creating skilled workforces that are relevant to the economic growth and development of the Virgin Islands. It makes little sense in my mind, and I don't know if my mind matters, but it makes little sense in my mind that we're spending 75, 80% of the support cost operations of the University of the Virgin Islands out of the general fund, and they're going in one direction, and we're spending millions of dollars trying to develop and grow and expand an economy in another direction, and they're not compatible. And so part of what we're going to be doing, I asked Dr. Hall to send me some nominees to put on the Economic Development Authority Board of Directors. We're going to bring the operations and the management and the expertise that the university has in tandem with the administration, so that as we work on tourism issues, as we work on growing and expanding the economy and dealing with technology and e-commerce, that we're all on the same page. Because what we need to do is to prepare the people within this territory to be able to have these jobs and do these jobs as companies are going to take the advantages and the opportunities for the work that we're trying to achieve as a community for expanding and growing the economy. In short, we want to connect all of the pieces so that our resources as a government are fully all on the same page, so that we're delivering to this community products that matter and that are sustainable and that are valuable. And so my presence on the Economic Development and Commerce Committee is important because as I sat in the meeting and I listened to governors talk about the absence of skilled personnel to work in companies that are coming back on the mainland, doing high-tech work, doing manufacturing robotics, the void is wide, and it's only going to get wider. And so they are struggling, other governors are struggling in their public universities in terms of how do we get the universities to sort of move away from this traditional strategy of you come out of high school, you do a liberal arts degree, you become a professional, whether you want to be a doctor or a professor or a lawyer, and we just do that, and a master's in business administration, and folks come out with these wonderful degrees, and then they go to sign up for jobs, and no one's really hiring them because the skill set that's needed isn't coming out with the students. And so we need to make that connectivity. I participated at the Department of Interior with the intergovernmental affairs session that they do annually for all the territories. And I thank the president that in my seating arrangement at the White House, he sat the Secretary of Interior, Ms. Sally Jewell, next to me. I have to concede I didn't really know who she was, but I Googled the name and I said, wow, okay. And I took my pen out, and by the time we were finished, Secretary Jewell had a wonderful list of the needs of the territory and the technical issues, and of course, our issues that we're dealing with having to do with the Department of Defense. But more importantly, we had not been participating in the intergovernmental affairs issues under Interior, and maybe for good reason, because they're very much focused on the Pacific Rim and the territories there, American Samoa, Guam, Northern Marianas, et cetera, and that's fine, and I certainly support those efforts. But we're losing a very powerful opportunity to get good technical and financial support in the territory under the Department of Interior. And just to make my point, the Department of Interior funds a $1 billion infusion to Guam over a 10-year period. They've already received $760 million of direct capital infusion to the operations and costs of their government. We have never gotten such a benefit and a help. And because they're on the end stage of that benefit, Ken Mapp and the government of the VI and the people of the VI are next in line. So I will be working very closely with the folks at Interior because we have a number of issues having to do with health and care, and we met with the Department of Human Services and the Centers of Disease Control and a number of health-related federal agencies on Monday. And to my chagrin, there are so many millions of dollars that are available to this territory for health-related care and services that we are not using. In point of fact, we are given some $2 to $2.5 million made available today for the purposes of direct mental health services and care. And for the last 10 years, we haven't spent more than $500,000 in any given year. And all of us in this room can just walk in the communities and see folks that we know need mental health services and care, and the resources are there, and we're just simply not utilizing them. And so, again, that is an issue that I'm going to be very personally involved with, not just the mental health issues, but the entire healthcare issues in the territory. Tremendous amount of dollars. The federal government will infuse directly into the healthcare systems in the Virgin Islands a minimum of $78 million each year going forward for the next 6 years if we do what we need to do to access those dollars. So I am going to take it on as a personal challenge to ensure that all of our health-related components, the departments, the hospitals, that we're all involved and we get on board and do what we need to do because our people need this kind of care and services. Why are we paying or having $60 million of uncompensated care and struggling to keep hospitals open when we have access to $70+ million annually that we're not really taking a very good part of and taking advantage of? So we've got to make sure that we put the structures and the strategies in place that all of us, Human Services, the Health Department, Wang Louis, the Schneider Regional Medical Center, all of us have to get involved. Our health clinics, like the Frederickstead Health Clinic and the one that exists on the East End Health Center on St. Thomas, the Department of Health no longer have a need to have clinic services. I'm going to do away with it because the health centers, Frederickstead Health Center and the East End Medical Center, the federal government is fully funding them, and they don't have staff issues for doctors and medical professionals and medicines, and our people can access those clinics more than on an 8-hour day. So why are we trying to pay through the general fund to have health clinics? Doing it in, I was going to use some profanity, I apologize. Doing it in a half-baked way, trying to provide health care, and got people sitting down getting salaries, and they can't do the work because we don't give them the resources when we have healthcare centers that are fully funded that can provide the services and get the job done. So we need to streamline those issues and the things, and as we said in the beginning, things that we don't need to do anymore, we're just going to stop doing them, and things that can be done better in the nonprofit community and even in the private sector. We're going to seed them and let them get done in a much more efficient manner. My three final issues. As you know, we spent over $200 million in the Virgin Islands Next Generation Network. It's out. We're running it through VINGN, which is under the Public Finance Authority. Part of our issue and my issue is concern for the security of that system. As you know, part of driving the cost of government down is to get out of the private platforms and get on a public platform that we've paid for that is really more modern than a number of the providers here. The speed alone in that system, I am told, is almost 10 times faster. And we have many government agencies paying private vendors for access to the internet with that system sitting there. But one of the key issues for that system and one of the big issues for the nation is cybersecurity. And in one of the presentations at the National Governors Association meeting was Secretary Johnson, the Secretary of the Department of Health of Homeland Security, and he brought his top general that is dealing with the cybersecurity issues in the nation. And we're going to work a strategy where the VINGN network will be ultimately transferred under the control and protection of the VI National Guard, thereby giving the Department of Defense full access to secure that system as it is securing the systems of the federal government, and then making sure there are portals available for the private sector use, making sure that all of the governmental institutions in the territory are fully connected, intra-connected and internet connected, including an objective to go fully voice over IP on that system. We're going to follow the model that the federal government is using that is saving them millions of dollars. Lieutenant General Robert Farrell, a Virgin Islander who manages a $10 billion budget for the U.S. Army on cybersecurity, communications, and connectivity, will be here in a month with his team to do a full assessment of that platform so that we understand where we need to go and how we're going to get the system fully protected and fully integrated in the community and throughout the systems of government. I want to thank our new delegate to Congress, Congresswoman Plaskett, for her work in our support in the things we were doing in Washington, D.C. in the last 2 weeks. Congresswoman Plaskett was very involved in setting up a number of these meetings and participating in a number of these meetings. And I am just pleased to report that we're working together on a unified strategy for the Virgin Islands in Washington, D.C. She's sort of, as you know, she is a Democrat, and so she is working the Democratic side of the aisle. She does cross over. I'm an independent. I like everyone. So I can go from Senator McConnell over to Senator Manchin and over to Congressman Bill Schuster and to the Obama administration. And I just sit there and smile. I'm here for the Virgin Islands. I got no nickel in the fight on party politics. So I want to thank Delegate Plaskett for her cooperation and her support and her assistance, and I certainly look forward to meeting with continued working with her as we work our strategies on the federal level. And finally, and we'll report this at a later time, probably following C-Trade, I spent Tuesday in New York with Commissioner Nicholson Doty, and she had a full schedule. We met with a host of folks that are providing meeting and events. One of the other niches in our tourism economy that's coming up is the issue having to do with events. And we're getting more and more events happening on the islands. And there are like 7 or 8 key companies that are driving events into this territory, group events. And I was able to spend about 2 hours with them. I also did a number of media interviews and presentations on launching the tourism campaign. I met in the afternoon with a host of travel writers from all different sources. The Huffington Post is very interested in doing a piece, and we're going to drive that piece centered around St. Croix and the issues happening here and the opportunities for business and tourism on the island here. And then Commissioner Doty started something that's really very profound, and she really must be commended for this. As you know, we have about 3 or 4 major associations of Virgin Islanders: New York, Maryland, Miami, and Atlanta. And at no cost, what Commissioner Doty has done under the Department of Tourism is she's garnered several hundred of the Virgin Islanders to become ambassadors for the Virgin Islands. And so they go out and they promote events and tourism issues to drive folks into the Virgin Islands. And they are called ambassadors of the USVI. And she hosted, or had me host a reception for them Tuesday evening in New York City. And with all the snow and the rain, I was a bit overwhelmed that several hundred of them showed up there in New York City. There was an association event held in Maryland the week before, and we had about 70 folks there. And I'm going to tell you, I am proud as a Virgin Islander to go and be among Virgin Islanders that are tremendously successful. Private sector, professionally, people are working in universities at the top levels of the State Department, the Defense Department, in the financial service sector, and they are actually contributing their time to help us. So we're going to have a number of those folks here working with us because we've got to build and push the Virgin Islands forward. Mark, the board of the Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I would be more than happy, and I apologize for my extended message. I said I would speak about 15 to 20 minutes, and I know that my watch is stinging me, meaning I've gone past my time, but I haven't met a microphone I don't like. So I'd like to open the floor for questions, if there are any. Then that does it for me. Thank you so much for your time and your attention.
What you're looking at is the Frederiksted charrette from 2005. These are some of the drawings where the government spent over $200,000 to create.
You got all this gut right here. I love that. And look at the way it creates kind of a mood on that beach there. Be great for fishermen. These can be